Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Me, oh my, there's a lot to buy. There is shopping I must do. Happy Easter to you.
ご機嫌いかがですか？渡辺Danです。On today's episode of Alt Cinema, The Weird Side of Movies, we're going to be talking about 1948's MGM musical Easter Parade, starring Judy Garland and Fred Astaire. Now, we're going to speak mainly about Fred Astaire today because this movie represented a major turning point in his career. We all remember the Fred Astaire from the 1930s. In the early 30s, he starred in an MGM movie called Dancing Lady, where he was a specialty number, doing the final big production number with Joan Crawford singing Hi-Ho, the gang's all here. And that was enough to get other studios interested. RKO Radio decided to give him an opportunity to be another novelty number with perhaps more screen time in a picture they were doing called Flying Down to Rio. This was the first time he was teamed with Ginger Rogers, who would go on to star with him in multiple movies over the course of the next 2 decades. Now, most of those movies were made at RKO, and the movie that they made at MGM in the 1950s was a one-off. But nonetheless, it still provided audiences with a reminder that old pros certainly do die hard. Today, almost no one remembers what the main story of Flying Down to Rio was, except for the fact that it had Fred and Ginger as that novelty number. They next were put by RKO into an adaptation of a successful Broadway play called The Gay Divorce. Now, because the production code had just come into being, it was clear that there was nothing gay about divorces at all, and certainly the word gay did not have the later connotation that it would have. So they added an extra E to it, and it became The Gay Divorcee. So that was looked to be a little bit more acceptable. And what The Gay Divorcee was it was a French farce that was done in the highest of Depression-era fantasy making. It featured a story that was beyond ridiculous of mistaken identities and romantic mistakes and misunderstandings. But it was all done very lightly with a bevy of some of RKO's greatest B players, including Edward Everett Horton and Eric Blore and multiple others. Now, what the movie was best remembered for was its production numbers. And at the time, there was still a fascination with doing big production numbers, such as been seen in the Warner Brothers musicals, such as 42nd Street or Footlight Parade, numbers that could never really fit on a stage properly. The Gay Divorcee, though, had one number in it that was highly memorable and actually set the stage for a whole new form of the musical. And that was a rendition of the song Night and Day, Cole Porter tune. And it was the scene where Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers first realized their love for each other. What's special about this number is that it has limited cuts. It's mostly done in long takes so that you had a sense of just how difficult it was for the performers to be able to do the dance number. And yet it also had a story to it. We see, as Fred and Ginger are dancing, the growing romantic attraction between the two of them, till at the end of the number, Ginger is quite literally breathless, and not only because she's had probably the equivalent to a massive workout. It's because she's so impressed by him, that the fact that he had this magnetism, the fact that he had this sexual persona when he was on the dance floor was something that made him unique and different and someone that anybody in the audience could fall in love with, or at least admire. This continued throughout their pairing in those early RKO movies, but as the country moved closer toward war, the kind of frothy entertainment that was represented by the RKO Van Ness Poglas musicals, such as Gay Divorce. Oh, Van Ness Poglas was a production designer who had this very hard Art Deco style. And it also included movies such as Top Hat, which took place in a Venice that never existed in the real world, and it was the better for it. But by the end of the 1930s, with the country looking more towards some of the stresses that were going on in Europe, this type of light, frothy romance was rapidly falling out of favor. And there was a darker and more serious side that was starting to creep into American movies. And plus, Ginger Rogers wanted to become considered a legitimate actress. And Fred, unfortunately, was not able to find another partner, although he certainly tried with Joan Fontaine and later on with Paulette Goddard. But none of them quite had that same panache that Rogers did. So he went into retirement. 1948 rolls around, and Judy Garland is starting to have some of her notorious problems. And yet, she's still someone that the audiences loved, and in spite of the trouble she was causing on and off the set, there was still a great appreciation for her talent. She was to star in Easter Parade, which is kind of a follow-up to For Me and My Gal, a rather somber showbiz tale about a guy who's a bit of a jerk. And for some reason, Kelly seemed to be very good at playing those kinds of roles. However, during a rehearsal, he broke his leg. And so MGM, in a panic, looked around to see who else could be brought in. And they ultimately decided that even though he was getting older, that Fred Astaire might be an interesting pairing. Now, let's not even go into the fact that Astaire was considerably older than Garland. And this is something that would dominate his performances throughout the latter part of the 40s and into the 50s, where he would be routinely teamed with ingenues, whether they be Sid Charisse or Audrey Hepburn, who were very close, if not well, into being young enough to be his daughter. And so there was a little bit of not necessarily weirdness, but a sense of moderately inappropriateness to the fact that he was 22 years older than Garland. Nonetheless, the two of them made a very interesting pair. But what was most interesting was the personality transformation that Astaire had to go through. During the RKO movies, most of his performances, again, were as rich fops. These were people who were continental. These were people who were well-bred. These were people who didn't have to worry where their next centime was coming from. And yet, in Easter Parade, he's playing someone who's far more populist. He's a successful ballroom dancer, but he is still a ballroom dancer. He is still someone who might not quite be on the Orpheum circuit. And it turns out that theatrical impresarios are more impressed with his partner, who happens to be played by Ann Miller, for whom this movie was a massive success and really launched her on her road to success, even though she was playing a villainess in it. She was playing a villainess, but guess what? Ann Miller was the kind of person who has such a strong personality and is so, sometimes even in spite of herself, likable, that we can't really be mad at her for that long, even if she is selfish, even though she does name her dogs after her dresses. It's an interesting performance. It's an interesting star turn by Miller. Anyway, she has an opportunity to go off and have a chance to star in something, but she won't be able to bring Fred along. Fred is hurt by this, and he makes a bet with Ann Miller's boyfriend, Johnny, a rich playboy who clearly is a dilettante and has no real sense of character other than to be a playboy and to constantly string women along. And he makes a bet that he can teach anyone to be the same as Ann Miller. He can teach anyone how to dance. And the person he runs into is, of course, Judy Garland, who happens to be in the chorus line.
Oh,
Sorry. Yeah, I think you'll do.
you think I'll do what?
I'm looking for someone to dance with.
Wrong number.
I need a new dancing partner. I don't know how much you're getting, but I'll give you $100 a week.
$100. That would never do for
All
me.
right, 150.
150. Thank you very much. Now, may I go?
Sure. Just a minute. Here's my card. I'll get a rehearsal hall at Michael's. You know where it is?
Yes.
All right, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock.
Now, just because Judy's in the chorus line doesn't mean that she is a chorus girl. Unfortunately, Fred leaves the nightclub, before he gets a chance to see what Judy's real talent is, which is singing.
I want to go back, I want to go back, I want to go back to the farm.
And so he misses the opportunity to see that this is where she's really from. This is her strong point. So he tries to turn her into Ann Miller. And as much as this fits in with the negative side of what MGM did to Garland, always emphasizing the fact that she was not pretty, that she was not a raving beauty, that she was everyone's more or less ugly sister who could just happen to sing really well. It still worked, because we get to see that Don, played by Astaire, cannot get over Ann Miller. He keeps trying to make Garland into something she's not, to the point where she's frustrated enough to where, when Peter Lawford comes around again and is flirting,
In 2 minutes, you've managed to find out that I'm not married, I'm not engaged, that I've come from the country and I'm going to meet a man on business.
It wasn't bad, was it?
Yeah, but you haven't told me a thing about yourself.
I'm just a fella with an umbrella, looking for a girl who saved her love for a rainy day.
she gets away from him, but we can tell that she's not quite done with him, and that she'll take up an opportunity later if he comes around, which of course he does. But she knows who he is. She is not taken in by him. Judy is smart in this. She's smarter than Fred. And Fred, still trying to get Ann Miller back, is told by her that everyone is laughing because Judy is just not glamorous. And then it happens.
I love the piano, I love the piano, I love to hear somebody play upon a piano, a grand piano, it simply carries me away. I know a fine way to treat a Steinway. I love to run my fingers o'er the keys, the ivories, and with the pen.
He allows her to sing, and he gets what's special about her. He gets the opportunity that she represents. Now, this is where the script takes a wild divergence from the original. In the original, we had the Fred Astaire character become increasingly jerky, that he's still interested in the Ann Miller character. He's not going to appreciate the Judy character until the end, when he has to learn his lesson, sort of the way he did in For Me and My Gal. Basically becoming a war hero. Here, he wouldn't have to go that far, and once Fred was in there, they knew that he could not bring off a villain. Fred Astaire is not a villain, and there was no reason to even attempt it. When Fred sees that Ann Miller is going to be the star of the Ziegfeld Follies, we see for a moment that he regrets it. It's almost as if his career has gone past. But he does feel depressed about it, but he does the right move because he had the opportunity to be part of the Follies as well with Judy, but he chose to give up that opportunity. There's a moment of ambiguity there where we're wondering whether it's because he doesn't want to be tempted, but we also see that he and she do so well together that he can't possibly be doing that. He is willing to throw away everything about his ballroom personality. And we see it when he and Judy have their opening night. And they do the song A Couple of Swells, where they play bums.
We're a couple of swells. We stop at the best hotels, but we prefer the country far away from the city smells.
And now this is something Judy had no problem playing. She was always a good man. But for Fred, this is a total transformation from his past. And he pulls it off. We like him as this human character. I'm going to go so far as to say we maybe even like him more than he was in the Ginger movies. I'm not going to say that the Ginger movies somehow take a secondary step to this, but no, he has totally remade his career, and it is fine. It is okay. We appreciate who he has become. Now comes the dramatic change. He and Judy go to see Ann Miller's play, and she convinces him to dance with her one time, and that, of course, gets Judy to misinterpret it. That even though he has found a new sense of self, he still seems so much more comfortable, and this is where Judy's own personal insecurities come up. We know that she and Fred Astaire were so much more effective doing A Couple of Swells than Ann Miller was singing The Girl on the Magazine cover. But it doesn't matter. She's still overcome with that jealousy. And it's at the point where even though she's had a successful opening night, she feels alone. So she goes back to the bar and she sings Better Luck Next Time.
So don't say better luck next time. That can never be, because there ain't gonna be no next time for me.
Absolutely heartbreaking rendition. And we understand that it's not based on reality, that Judy is over-interpreting Fred's actions. Now, the movie was written by Sidney Sheldon, who would go on to write I Dream of Jeannie, and then in the 70s and 80s, a series of increasingly ridiculous but nevertheless wonderful bestsellers that took advantage of the fact that he was a genius writer. Even when he was writing something like The Bachelor and the Bobby Sox, he gets nominated for an Academy Award. And he has a sense of how to bring out the dark side of the characters. And in the morning, Judy is still feeling depressed, and she goes to visit Peter Lawford, and he, in turn, does an unselfish act, which we don't expect from him. And that unselfish act is he lets her go back. He lets her understand that maybe it's her time. Remember, this is 1948. We don't have a lot of liberation. This is a period piece. And she has to let Don know that she's interested.
Well, if I love someone, I'd find a way to let them know it.
Well, it's different with a man.
Why?
I don't know, it just is, that's all. It's easier. They can... Johnny.
You get in there and put on his favorite dress. You'll be late for the Easter parade. And do something about your face. You look horrible.
Oh, Johnny, thank you. Thank you.
She takes on the masculine role. She shows up at his place with gifts, with an Easter hat, and sings the song Easter Parade.
In your Easter bonnet, with all the frills upon it, you'll be the grandest fellow in the Easter parade.
And they go off on the walk down the avenue, and yes, everyone is now paying attention to Judy, and he gives her a wedding ring, and we still see that Ann Miller is fine. She's got her Russian wolfhound, she's got her boyfriend, so it's a happy ending for everyone, and for the audience, we're happy too.
And my heart beat fast as I came through the door.